Hey, what's up, guys? Hello to Football Talk here. I'm back after a week off with a topic that a lot of people really got into since several networks connected to the NFL put out their rankings of the top triplets in the NFL. So I thought I'd put my name out there in the conversation by doing a rundown of my personal top 10. For this exercise, I included only one quarterback, one running back, and one wide receiver each. That means no players beyond that, no consideration of the offensive scheme or play caller, as much as that is possible at least. And just to lay the ground rules here, I will weigh all three positions equally. So just because you have that one elite quarterback doesn't necessarily mean you'll be right up there with the top groups. And if one of those spots doesn't have a really good play at least, I don't care how great the other two are. So with that being said, here's my list of the best trios heading into 2020. At number 1, I have the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Davante Adams. And I usually found this trio around 5 or 6 in most lists. But the way I have these guys ranked is the following. Aaron Rodgers is my top 5 quarterback in the league. Aaron Jones has established himself as a clear top 10 back, and you could argue he's closer to 5 than 10. And Adams right now is the third best receiver in football for me. So for Rodgers, he might have declined a little these last few years, but a lot of that had to do with injuries in 2017 and 18. You go back before that in 2016, he led the league with 40 touchdown passes and a passer rating north of 100. Last season, with head coach Matt LaFleur coming in, implementing a new offensive scheme, which is an adaptation of the Shanahan system, being built more on the zone run game and bootlegs off that to go with well-designed screen passes. Rodgers didn't put up quite those explosive numbers that we're used to with him, but he still elevated a roster that I wouldn't put in the top 10 personally to a 13-3 record with a first-round bye in the playoffs. His team was 8-1 in one-score games, which often has a lot to do with the quarterback, and Rodgers personally was in the top 10 in both intended air yards at 8.9 and yards to the sticks on average, meaning he threw the ball slightly beyond the mark at 0.1 yards, and all of that without a second receiver even reaching the 500-yard mark. Rodgers might have lost some of that mobility to extend plays that we have seen from him so many times, and he's a little more hesitant to pull the trigger and just fire the ball deep, but he is still one of the league's best in my opinion. You look at the running back position with Aaron Jones, he really had a breakout season last year, which I kind of predicted before the season when I listed my breakout players. I did the same a couple of weeks ago for this upcoming season, you can check that out later. But Jones, he put up 1,558 yards from scrimmage and 19 touchdowns, whilst becoming the Packers' first 1,000-yard rusher since Eddie Lacy back in 2014. Jones may not be very big, but he has good contact balance and just that ability to slither through defenses, while also featuring the second gear to pull away from opponents. His production maybe wasn't quite as consistent as some of the other guys at the position, but what really stood out for the fourth year back in Green Bay is just the way he could take over some games. There were 5 different contests in which he recorded at least 150 yards from scrimmage, and he scored multiple touchdowns in 6 of them. Jones has become a tough inside runner, but he still has that burst to the edge, and he really gets involved as a downfield receiver as well. For Davante Adams, he steadily improved every single season pretty much since coming out of Fresno State in 2014. You go back to 2018, he put up career highs with nearly 1,400 yards receiving and 13 touchdowns. Last season, he was off to a great start once again and on pace to set some new personal marks. Unfortunately, he banged up his toe in week 4 against the Eagles, but that was a game he put up 180 yards receiving as well. That injury cost him 4 games and it kind of slowed him down even after that. But when the playoffs rolled around, he went off for 300 receiving yards in those 2 games he appeared in. Adams to me is one of the best route runners in the league, thanks to the way he sets up his breaks with head fakes and different body language. But the body control and the great hands he has also really helps him out in 50-50 ball situations, and he routinely keeps his feet in bounds on catches along the sideline. So I would expect Rodgers to once again heavily target number 17 next season. Right behind the Packers, I have the New Orleans Saints with Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and Michael Thomas. And the gap between 2 and 3 to me is much bigger than it is between 1 and 2. There's a strong argument that the Saints have a top 3 running back and wide receiver, but to me their aging quarterback is a little bit of a difference here, which didn't allow me to put them at the very top of the list, because as great as he is in the all-time ranks, we're talking about the talent of these players heading into 2020. Drew Brees is the league's all-time leader in completions, yards, and touchdowns for a reason. He's like a well-oiled machine in that Sean Payton offense with complete control at the line of scrimmage and rapid quickness to work through his progressions and just get the ball out of his hands. Last season, he missed almost 6 games with a thumb injury, but still threw for just under 3,000 yards and 27 touchdowns compared to only 4 picks. But as great as all those numbers are, you have to consider he has one of the all-time great offensive play designers, a record-setting wide receiver, and one of the elite offensive lines of football. As much as Brees excels from the shoulders up, he can't really push the ball down the field anymore because of the way his arm has fallen off recently, which is indicated by the 4th lowest number of intended air yards at 6.7 among quarterbacks with at least 100 attempts. Brees to me is still one of the premier field generals, but he's just not as explosive a passer as some of the other guys on this list are. Alvin Kamara was banged up quite a bit last season as well. While he did play in all but 2 games and put up over 1,300 scrimmage yards, according to himself, Kamara was basically playing on one leg, which referred to some lingering knee and ankle injuries. He still made his 3rd straight Pro Bowl, but after 2 years of being part of a 1-2 punch with him and Mark Ingram, who's now in Baltimore, Kamara had a chance to really blow up last season. We still don't know for sure if Kamara can handle the full load, but with Sean Payton always having a 2-back system anyway, I don't think that will be the case, and there's really only like 3 or 4 backs in the league altogether that I would refer to as true workhorse backs. Instead, you have to look at how incredibly effective Kamara has been so far. Through his first 2 seasons, when he was totally healthy, he averaged 6.61 yards per touch. Kamara has stupid contact balance, he's super explosive, and he's basically uncoverable on those option routes out of the backfield. Even with Latavius Murray taking away some of those touches and looking very effective down the stretch, I would expect 16 to 1,800 yards from scrimmage for Kamara once again next season. And then Michael Thomas, to me, is the 2nd best receiver in the league behind only Julio Jones. Most people actually want to put him at the top of the list right now after setting a new record in most receptions in a season at 149 and leading the league in receiving yards with over 1,700. But I don't think he's quite as dynamic after the catch or threatening the defense vertically as Julio is. With that being said, he's still such a physical, well-schooled route runner who routinely comes through for them on 3rd downs and catches pretty much everything thrown his way. Shows very strong hands and great concentration, only at 9 drops compared to 274 catches since 2018. Thomas can obviously win from the outside and at the catch point, but you literally can't guard Mike on slant routes, crosses, or operating out of the slot. That's where he's most effective. And now with the Saints finally having added a viable number 2 receiver in Emmanuel Sanders, he will have some pressure taken off him. At number 3 of the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire the rookie, and Tyreek Hill. And this triple is the only one with that one unproven commodity at the NFL level, but I see the rookie running back as such a perfect fit, and my belief is that the 2 other pieces are so large that I just couldn't put them any lower than this. I chose Edwards-Helaire over Damian Williams despite his Super Bowl heroics because I think he will take over the majority of the touches in that backfield sooner than later. And we look at the other 2 guys, Patrick Mahomes, he's pretty much in a class by himself right now. And Tyreek Hill, he's the league's premier big play threat. Mahomes just earned the biggest contract for any professional athlete in team sports that we've ever seen. I know there's a lot of things going on with the guarantees and how long will that contract actually last the way it is. But just to be simplistic, total earnings, it is the biggest one we've seen. And to me, Mahomes, he's the most talented player that we've ever gotten to watch. And the accomplishments through his first 2 years, they're just absurd. He has combined for 76 touchdowns compared to only 17 interceptions, over 300 yards passing per game, while still completing 66% of his passes, despite averaging 8.6 yards per attempt, which is second only to Otto Graham all time. Mahomes has already won a league MVP. He led his team to a Super Bowl trophy for the first time in 50 years, brought his team back in 3 consecutive games, having to overcome double-digit deficits, and then he wrapped up things with the MVP in the big game as well. Mahomes can make some throws that no other quarterback in the league would even attempt. And the scary thing with him is, he could get even better. Now let's get to the rookie running back. Edwards-Helaire to me was right on the fringe of being a top 50 prospect in the draft, and I had a few backs ranked ahead of him, but I actually predicted him to go to the Chiefs in my mock draft, and he could make this KC offense outright unfair. Last season at LSU, he averaged 6.6 yards per carry, and he caught 55 passes, whilst reaching the end zone 17 times combined. As great as Joe Burrow and all those receivers were for the Tigers last season, in a lot of games, you could argue that the 5'7" bowling ball was the best play on the field. Not only does CEH have excellent vision and short area quickness, but he routinely ran right through defenders and he averaged 3.65 yards after contact. Several times have I talked about this now. When you have all those guys streaking down the field for the Chiefs, And then this guy catches a check down underneath with the mentality of wanting to go through somebody's face. Nobody will want to tackle this guy. And then the third guy, Tyreek Hill, he came into the league as more of a gadget player, went for 860 yards and 9 touchdowns and 85 touches as a rookie, in addition to adding 3 more scores in the return game. But from that point on, he has really developed into an outstanding all-around receiver for me, which was highlighted by 2018 when he came up just short of 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns through the air alone. I know we don't have any official combine numbers on him, but just turn on the tape. Hill is the fastest player in the NFL, and nobody puts more fear into the heart of defenses with the threat of beating them deep on every single play. At the same time, he has those lightning quick feet, has become much more advanced as a route runner, and shows tremendous focus when the ball is in the air. Last year, he was knocked out early on in the season opener, and he ended up missing 4 games. But when his team needed him most, he came through, catching that 44-yard bomb on 3rd and long in the Super Bowl when the 49ers seemed to be in firm control over the game, and from that point on, everything changed. At number 4, the Arizona Cardinals, with Kyler Murray, Kenyon Drake, and DeAndre Hopkins, kind of the new kids on the block. Kyler Murray last season came in as the number 1 overall pick and instantly became the man for this team. Kenyon Drake, he came over from Miami in the middle of the season and immediately got the majority of the touches among that group of backs in Arizona. And now with the trade for DeAndre Hopkins as a true number 1 receiver, this passing attack could really go to a different level. For Kyler Murray, he seemed to have kind of an easy transition from Oklahoma to another air raid offense under Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona. And while there were some struggles early on for him personally, as well as the head coach having to make some adjustments to his system, overall the rookie QB had an excellent debut campaign. Kyler completed over 64% of his passes for 3,700 yards and 20 touchdowns compared to 12 INTs to go along with another 544 yards and 5 scores as a runner, with the yardage being second only to Lamar Jackson. I know the team only won 5 games last season, but I expect the dynamic signal caller and this entire team to take a big step forward in 2020. Murray was sacked a league-high 48 times last season, and his best receiver for the most part of his rookie campaign was a 36-year-old Larry Fitzgerald. This guy has one of the top 5 arms in the league, and the elusiveness to extend plays or make people miss for crucial first downs. He has the potential to become a true superstar in this league. Kenyon Drake, he was a revelation in Arizona last season. He was acquired for a 6th-round pick mid-season, and after averaging only 3.7 yards per carry through his first 6 games with Miami, he put together 814 yards from scrimmage on just 151 touches and scored 8 touchdowns over the final 8 weeks. Of course, he showed some signs with the team that originally drafted him, but he never got the amount of touches he deserved, and he was just a perfect fit for this wide-open Cardinals offense. When they spread the field with 4 receivers and then run that zone read or speed option against those 6 defenders in the box, it is the offense that actually has the +1 a lot of times. And then if you give Drake some space to work with, he can be a dynamic player. That's also the case on those quick swing screens as an extension of the run game, or getting him involved in those more typical delayed screens. At the same time, Drake can make some people miss in tight spaces, and I would expect the 26-year-old to have a monster year in his first full season in the desert. And then you have DeAndre Hopkins, who has been one of the elite receivers in the game for several years now. Outside of the 2016 season, when he had Brock Osweiler not even being able to put the ball somewhere where Nuke could make a play on it, he has averaged 100 catches with 1,243 yards and 9.6 touchdowns since his rookie season. And that's despite catching passes from quarterbacks like Matt Schaub, TJ Yates, Case Keenum, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Brian Hoyer, and Ryan Mallett, until the Texans finally found their true franchise signal caller. You look at D-Hop, he's probably the most physical and aggressive receiver before the catch, and the way he gets off press or just throws defenders around. He also shows outstanding body adjustments when the ball is in the air, and he has the most reliable hands in the game, with huge paws to just swallow the ball. Now with some extra motivation after being traded away, and as part of an offense that already finished in the top 10 in pass attempts, despite having a rookie quarterback and limited weapons, expect this guy to ball out once again in 2020. At number 5, probably the most controversial pick on my list here, the Cleveland Browns with Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, and Odell Beckham Jr. There are definitely some questions with this group here, but to me, I still think the Browns have one of the most lethal trios in the game. Baker Mayfield had kind of a sophomore slump after showing great signs as a rookie, but with Nick Chubb leading the league in rushing all the way until week 17, And while he hasn't quite lived up to expectations in Cleveland yet, OBJ is clearly one of the most talented receivers the league has ever seen. Mayfield definitely showed some regression in year 2 when it comes to downfield accuracy, decision making, and just taking care of the ball. If it wasn't for Jameis Winston just blowing everybody out the water, Baker would have led the league with 21 interceptions thrown, and like I mentioned recently, you could put several of those 40 sacks last season on him for bailing on the pocket or just holding onto the ball too long. With that being said, you also have to mention their offensive tackles, how horrendous that duo was for them, being more like speed bumps on the way to the guy with the ball, and there were a bunch of lingering injuries with this group of skill position players around Baker. The offense should have always been built on the ground game, but because they fell behind in so many games, Baker did finish with 33.4 pass attempts per game, and there were so many occasions where he and his receiver clearly weren't on the same page in terms of how to break off their routes, make subtle adjustments on the run. And his guys also let him down quite a bit with drops, as 6 of them directly led to interceptions. Nick Chubb, to me, still doesn't get the recognition he deserves. He was the best player on this entire team, and while I don't want to take anything away from the incredible run Derrick Henry had late last season, the Browns running back deserved that rushing crown. He was up almost 100 yards on Henry, who went for over 200 in a Week 17 matchup with Houston, who were actually sitting most of the starters. Chubb finished with just under 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns on right around 300 attempts, and he added another 36 catches for 277 yards, while he and Derrick Henry were the only 2 players with 200 plus carries to average at least 5 yards per attempt. In large part due to the 2 tackles that I already talked about, which actually will be replaced by what could be one of the better duos in the league in my opinion, Chubb did not nearly have as much success running off tackle as he should have, but he's built low to the ground with a running style that is kind of a cumulative effect on the opposing teams just because of the way he loads up that shoulder and takes it to the defense play in play out. And Chubb has much better pull away speed than people think. And then we get to OBJ. He had one of the greatest rookie seasons we have ever seen from a wide receiver, and he just continued to wow fans over his next 4 years in New York City. Until he was traded to Cleveland last offseason, he was averaging 92.8 receiving yards per game, which would rank behind only Julio Jones in terms of career averages. And expectations were high for him pairing up with Baker and his former LSU teammate Jarvis Landry. Unfortunately, he never looked quite like the dynamic superstar we are used to from the Big Apple, with just 2 games of more than 100 receiving yards. However, I think a lot of that had to do with a foot injury that was bothering him all year long and just missing that chemistry with his new quarterback. While the Browns offense should definitely be run first and the new head coach Kevin Stefanski, with Baker going deep off play action, with OBJ going on a post from the backside for example, or giving his top receiver a chance to run after the catch on a slant route on the backside of an RPO concept, we could see a lot more of those splash plays that we're accustomed to from him. At number 6, I have the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott, Ezekiel Elliott, and Amari Cooper. And the Cowboys are the team that brought us that original triplet in the 90s with Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. This version is pretty good too, but they're also very expensive. Dak Prescott had a good chance of becoming the highest paid player in the league until Patrick Mahomes obviously got his monster deal. Ezekiel Elliott got the biggest contract at his position last offseason before Christian McCaffrey recently surpassed him, and Amari Cooper's $100 million of total value is still the highest among all receivers. Dak Prescott came in as a 4th round pick in 2016, and he played so well in place of Tony Romo that the veteran quarterback decided to retire. I don't think his development has gone quite the way people expected it to after seeing what he did as a rookie, but he just put up career highs in passing yards with less than 100 short of the 5,000 yard mark and touchdowns with 30 of those, whilst picking up the second most first downs through the air at 229 and finishing in the top 5 in yards per attempt at 8.2. While I would say that Dak has more general accuracy rather than pinpoint accuracy, he can get the ball anywhere on the field, extends plays, and you simply can't overlook his rushing production, with over 1,200 yards and another 21 trips to the end zone through his first 4 years in the league. With that being said, he has benefited from a great O-line in Dallas and a team that was built on the rushing attack. You look at some of the big games for Dallas last season, Dak really came up small at New England versus Buffalo on Thanksgiving and at Philadelphia to decide the division, for example. To me, Dak is right on the fringe of being top 10 at the position. Then you get to Ezekiel Elliott, and he had an even greater debut campaign and should have actually been the Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2016 over his teammate, when he led the league with over 1,600 rushing yards. He repeated that feat 2 years later and got a big-time contract in the process, which he now needs to justify. Last season, I thought he didn't quite have that breakaway gear and that explosion through the hole that we had seen from him so many times. But some of that might have to do with the fact that he's averaged over 20 rushing attempts per game alone, and that doesn't even include 189 more catches. Plus, you look at the Cowboys, their heavy tendency of running the ball on first downs, when Zeke has not been effective at all last season, just because of defenses being able to focus in on the run and game plan for it to some degree. Zeke is still one of the elite pass protecting backs in the league, and if he can just shed a few pounds this offseason, he might look more dynamic already again. You have to consider that last year he didn't really have an offseason with the team, and while we don't know how it looks like this year, at least it's the same for everybody. I think Zeke is still definitely one of the most complete backs we have in the game, but he has to step up once again this upcoming season. And then Amari Cooper, he was originally selected at the same spot in the draft a year before Zeke by Oakland at 4th overall, where he had kind of an inconsistent start to his career, but since he's come over to Dallas, he has put up over 1,900 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns in 25 games. I can deal with some drop issues for this guy, but the two things that really keep me from ranking him high individually and maybe this group overall are the facts that, similar to his quarterback, he hasn't really shown up in the big matchups, and he really had some issues getting off press against the really physical corners like Stephon Gilmore or Jalen Ramsey last season. With that being said, he's still an exquisite route runner who can break the ankles of defenders with the way he sets up his double moves. And you look at it, 54 of his 79 catches last season resulted in a fresh set of downs, and he's also an amazing toe tap artist. At number 7, I have the Minnesota Vikings with Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, and Adam Thielen, one of the more underrated trios we have in the league in my opinion. Their quarterback is around the top 10 every single year. Until his offseason they had 2 receivers who you could have called number ones, and now running back who finished behind only Christian McCaffrey in terms of yards from scrimmage per game. Kirk Cousins may not ever be looked at as an elite quarterback, and you could argue that he is more of the result of all the pieces around him, but you can't disagree with the numbers. Yes, there have been some bad moments for him, but all he has done through his first 2 years in Minnesota is complete almost 70% of his passes for 7,900 yards and 56 touchdowns. Kirk had a lot of success last season, in particular in the Kevin Stefanski, Gary Kubiak offense, where he has put on the move of bootlegs and could get his tight ends involved or just square his shoulders and go deep as well. He finished in the top 6 in touchdown percentage, average yards per attempt, and passer rating, while also leading the league in time to throw at over 3 seconds to kill some of those stereotypes of not being much of a vertical passer. He still kind of has that stigma around it when it comes to primetime games, but with that big playoff victory in New Orleans, as I think a double-digit underdog, he has given himself some room to breathe. Dalvin Cook was on an incredible pace last season. Until he got knocked out in week 15 with a shoulder injury, he was averaging 180 yards and just under 1 touchdown per game up to that point. In their wildcard round game against New Orleans, that I already talked about, he came back and went for 130 yards from scrimmage and reached the end zone twice in an upset victory. The week after, the 49ers put the clamps on the entire Vikings squad, and Cook was the guy they wanted to eliminate first of all. But outside of that, you look at Dalvin, he's a home run threat from the running back position, who does an excellent job of pressing the front side on those zone run plays, and then making that fluid cutback to take advantage of some lanes opening up inside once he gets to the edge a few times early on. He was also highly effective on screenplays last season, and the main reason the play-action game worked as well as it did for the Vikings. Adam Thielen to me was always right there with now his former teammate Stephon Diggs, but the guy who still remains has been more productive and more trusted by his quarterback during the time there. I still remember Thielen covering and returning kicks as an unknown player who got his shot at the local tryouts in preseason of 2014. Actually mentioned him in one of my very early articles after seeing him for the first time ever. And he has come incredibly far from that point to someone who recorded 2,790 yards and 13 touchdowns combined in 2017 and 18. I actually thought Thielen was a little overhyped maybe 2 years ago when he started the season off with an impressive 8 straight 100 yards games until he began facing some of the better corners in the league. But because he was banged up for most of last season, he's actually been undervalued right now, and he'll be one of those guys that I will be frequently targeting in fantasy football just because of the floor he presents. Thielen's a very patient, deceptive route runner who knows how to set up his opponents, and he routinely makes those tough catches down the field. It'll be interesting to see how Minnesota uses him and rookie Justin Jefferson, since both to me are best suited in the slot, but can maybe have interchangeable roles kind of. At number 8, I have the Tennessee Titans with Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and A.J. Brown. And if you put up this trio here a year ago, most people would have probably laughed at you. Derrick Henry did look like a monster down the stretch already in 2018, but Ryan Tannehill was mostly referred to as a disappointing high draft pick, and Brown was selected just outside the top 50 and was labeled as a slot receiver only. Who knew a few months later these guys would be huge parts in leading Tennessee to the first AFC Championship game appearance since 2002. Tannehill is a former top 10 pick from the 2012 draft who 6 weeks into last season, when taking over for Marcus Mariota, started really turning this Titans squad and his own career around. He completed over 70% of his passes for 22 touchdowns compared to 6 interceptions and led his team to a 7-3 record in the regular season. That's already pretty great, but the reigning comeback player of the year was one of the best across pretty much all of the advanced stats as well. He finished third in both average intended air yards at 9.6 and yards beyond the sticks at 0.6, both behind only Matthew Stafford and Jameis Winston. He also had the second highest touchdown percentage behind only Lamar Jackson at 7.7 and a full yard more per attempt than any other quarterback in the league, to go along with the top passer rating of 117.6. In addition to that, Tannehill pulled the ball in a couple of zone reads or just took off for big conversions of scrambles. If you look at the 43 carries last season that he had, 14 of them went for first downs, and he finished 4 of them in the end zone. The only question with this guy now is, did he just catch lightning in a bottle for 1 year on a team that had a great rushing attack, or is this sustainable? Derrick Henry is the league's reigning rushing leader with 1,540 yards, and he tied for a league-high 16 touchdowns, giving him an average of 5.1 yards per attempt, and almost 1,000 of his rushing yards came after contact. When you have a 250-pound banger like this guy, he puts fear in the heart of defenders just because of what a freight train he is coming right at them. But the speed for a guy his size is just ridiculous. The Titans run a lot of inside and outside zone where Henry can build up momentum, and as long as you don't force him to stop his feet in the backfield and change directions, he's a load to bring down. But if you allow him to get to the edge, he has those long arms to keep defenders away from his body, and once he is past the second level of the defense, you better hope that your deep safety is willing to stick his face in the fan or is just able to keep up with those long strides. A.J. Brown was only a rookie last season, but he immediately became the team's number 1 receiver over a slightly older top 5 pick in Corey Davis. The former Ole Miss pass catcher hauled in 52 balls for 1,051 yards and 8 touchdowns, averaging 20.2 yards per grab and picking up 39 first downs on the way. That is all despite seeing only 84 targets come his direction. When you combine that to a guy like Alshon Jeffrey of the Eagles, who has kind of similar measurements, who saw 73 targets, he didn't even crack the 500-yard mark. Brown has such a thick, strong build, but not only is he physical with the ball in his hands, but he also showed the ability to just rip off big plays by running away from defenders after catching the ball over the middle or tracking the ball deep as well. The Titans even got him involved on some jet sweeps. Brown has already proven that he can succeed inside and out, and he should only improve his production with more chances. At number 9, I have the Seattle Seahawks with Russell Wilson, Chris Carson, and DK Metcalf. And this group from the Pacific Northwest is somewhat carried by their quarterback, but they have a running back who just continues to produce no matter how much people want to doubt him, and a potential superstar in the making at the wide receiver position. When this quarterback fakes the handoff and then throws the ball deep to his young wideout, it creates major issues for opponents. Russell Wilson to me is the second best quarterback in the league, and if I needed one score at the end of the game, I want the ball in the hands of this guy. Even if you take away those first 3 years for him to start off his career, when the Legion of Boom got all the credit and Russ was quietly getting the job done as a super effective player, over these last 5 seasons, he's averaged over 3,950 passing yards and 31 touchdowns compared to 8.4 interceptions, and that doesn't even include well over 2,000 yards and 8 more scores on the ground. Wilson is an incredible deep ball thrower on those rainbow passes right into the breadbasket of his receivers, which is indicated by an average of 54.2 passes of 20 plus yards over that same stretch. Most impressively, however, he has done all of that despite playing behind a bottom 10 offensive line pretty much throughout his career, and his own coaching staff taking the ball out of his hands. As one of the most run-heavy teams in the league with little chances of throwing the ball on first downs, Russ constantly extends plays and wills his teams to victory, having finished above 500 every single season of his career. Running back Chris Carson is a guy who people constantly believe will be replaced, especially after seeing Rashad Penny being selected in the first round of the draft a couple of years ago, but somehow he has always shouldered the majority of the load. Over these last 2 seasons as a starter in Seattle, He has put up just over 2,800 yards and 18 touchdowns, despite missing 3 combined games. Since 2018, only Nick Chubb has forced more missed tackles at 107 compared to 110, and 55.8% of Carson's rushing yards have come after contact. When you look at his receiving total as well, he has gained 29 yards more after the catch than his total receiving yards. I don't think anybody in the league runs harder than this guy, and not even his own team could bench him long term if they wanted to. The only issue with Carson has been fumbles. He's put the ball on the ground 10 times combined over his last 2 years, and that's definitely something he needs to work on to take away all the questions about his game. DK Metcalf is the other Ole Miss receiver who actually went a little later than his teammate in the second round of last year's draft with A.J. Brown, which was talked about, but he's somebody that people to me just overthought. I had Metcalf as my number 1 receiver available because of the freakish size, speed and physicality he presented. People got way too hung up with his bad free cone drill and the fact he ran a very limited route tree in college. While he did run mostly slants, hitches and fade routes as a rookie, and will probably never run too many intricate routes down the field, he was very productive on those and did run some double moves later on the season. He certainly had some struggles early on with some drops and fumbled 3 times, but he also showed improvement with setting up his routes and already earned the trust from his quarterback to win one-on-one and make the proper adjustments on the scramble drill. Metcalf finished the season by breaking the rookie receiving yards record in the wildcard game against the Eagles when he went for 160 yards. I could have easily chosen Tyler Lockett here as well, who has shown incredible chemistry with Russell Wilson, but DK could be a nightmare to cover for years to come, and we're kind of projecting here as well. And wrapping up the list are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady, Ronald Jones II, and Mike Evans. This trio starts with a guy who has spent 2 decades in New England and has now joined a new team. Tom Brady is coming over to Tampa Bay to pair up with probably the best receiving duo in the league today in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, plus a 3-headed monster at tight end. And the running back room still has to settle the split of the workload, but to me Rojo is still that top guy. Brady has a resume that nobody in NFL history can match. He's second only to Drew Brees in both passing yards and touchdowns. He's a 14-time Pro Bowler, 3-time league MVP, and he has those 6 rings of course. And while his numbers have gone down a little these last 2 seasons, because of all the young phenoms that we have now, people seem to forget this guy led the league in touchdown passes and was named the MVP in 2017 only. Watching his tape from a year ago, I saw a little tendency to not quite be as willing to stand in there and take the punishment in order to make those big-time throws down the field, which is why I'm interested to see how this offense will evolve with more of a quick rhythm pass game maybe to combine with Bruce Arians does in his vertical passing attack. But at 43 years old, Brady's arm isn't much worse than it was 20 years ago. He's still close to a pinpoint thrower in between the numbers, plays with a tremendous fire, and has come up clutch when his team needed him most over and over and over again. Ronald Jones had an unbelievable junior season at USC when he averaged 5.9 yards per carry and 13.4 yards per reception, on his way to over 1,700 scrimmage yards and 20 touchdowns. His rookie season in the NFL, however, was highly disappointing, touching the ball only 30 times and averaging less than 2 yards per carry in those 9 games he played. Last year, he made a much better second impression, touching the ball over 200 times overall for more than 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, while more than doubling his rushing yards per attempt at 4.2 and catching 31 passes. While I don't really look at him anymore as that same dynamic runner that he was at USC in terms of making people miss and ripping off those long runs, I think he's become much tougher, running the ball in between the tackles, and that production as a receiver will be crucial as Brady is coming in, who has completed 120 plus passes to his backs in each of the last 3 years. And for receiver, Mike Evans got the slight nod over his teammate Chris Godwin, simply because he has done it for a longer period of time, and he's a little more of a downfield weapon. When you look at the numbers Evans has put out so far in his career, he's now the only receiver in NFL history to start out his career with 6 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons. His 80.7 receiving yards per game is more than Jerry Rice, Randy Moss or T.O. put up in their respective careers, and he has scored 49 touchdowns in 90 games so far. Big Mike is obviously dominant when the ball is in the air, but he also gets in and out of his breaks much better than you would anticipate from a 6'5", 230-pound receiver. And what I really appreciate about his game is the fact that he gets after defenders as a blocker. And since we just talked about some comparisons, Evans' 17.5 yards per grab over these last 2 seasons is better than what Tyreek Hill has done over that same stretch with the most explosive deep ball thrower in the game. And now let's get to 3 more teams who just missed the cut. First up, the Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones, to me, the number 1 receiver in the game today. Just so well rounded, ultra productive, just doesn't slow down. Matt Ryan, a top 10 quarterback in the league to me, kind of overlooked now because of Breeze and Brady in this division, but he has a good case for being right up there with them, maybe even ahead of the two guys. And then Todd Gurley, he's the big question mark here, because just a couple of years ago, he was one of the elite backs in the game, but not even his coaches know what his health looks like right now. And I still have to see him get back closer to what he was a couple of years ago, because with that knee injury last season, he just didn't look like the same guy when he was out there. Then the Detroit Lions, very underrated trio in my opinion. Matthew Stafford, always one of those guys who, when he is healthy, has carried this team to victories. Last season, looked like an MVP candidate early on before he got hurt. Kenny Galladay, also like on the fringe of a top 10 receiver, maybe the best contested catch guy in the league today, and much more of a vertical threat than you would anticipate when you look at the numbers. And then DeAndre Swift, the rookie, my number one running back in the draft. Very shifty, elusive back once he gets into the open. Has that dead leg to just leave people behind in the dust. And very skilled pass catcher who bailed his quarterback at Georgia out quite a bit last season. And then finally, Pittsburgh Steelers, with Big Ben coming back. I'm not totally sure what we'll get from him. But in 2018, one of the better quarterbacks in the league still. Injuries have kind of caught up with him, but he still has the pieces around him to succeed. And if he's back to that form and has the other guys healthy around him, I think this group can definitely be up there, with Juju Smith-Schuster also being banged up last season quite a bit. Young star receiver, at his best as that big slot. Has yet to prove that he could be a true number one this game, but now has a lot of young pass catchers around him that can help him out and draw some of the attentions away from him. And then James Conner, who in 2018, when Le'Veon Bell was sitting out, really burst onto the scene. 15 to 1600 yards from scrimmage, several big touchdowns. Not quite sure if he'll get back to that, but now with a viable quarterback and the center as well, and given the threat of the pass, he should have more room to run as well. I'm already interested to see what we have with some of the young guys in Denver or Cincinnati even. Can some of those quarterbacks emerge and with the weapons around them make their way onto the list next season maybe? But that is it for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, just share it with one friend today, that would already help out a lot. You can check out more of my videos here on the YouTube channel or go to my page helloswithfootballtalk.com. Plus you have all my social media linked down below. I will be back next week. Not totally sure with what yet because I don't know what's happening with training camp. I'm already working on some of the bigger position battles. We'll see there. I'm also working on my list of the NFL top 100 players for 2020 with the NFL Network starting their rundown I think next week as well. So a lot of things in the making. Be sure to tune in next week. So until then, see you later. Peace.